Hi, I'm attorney Bill Bronchick, and in this video I'd like to share with you 7 valuable tips for making sure that a real estate offer that you make gets accepted, has the highest chance of it. You know, it's a competitive market right now. It's more of a seller's than buyer's market, but this works in pretty much every market to make sure that your offer gets looked at and gets accepted more often than not. And not necessarily with the highest price, and not necessarily be paying all cash and so forth. These are tips that'll work universally regardless of what the offer is. So the first thing is, know what the seller wants. Before you make an offer, you've got to know what the seller's needs are, what his wants are, what his strategy is after the closing. Is he going to move? Is he going to use the money for something else? Now, when you're dealing with a bank-owned property, obviously there's only one motivation, that's money. But when you're dealing with, let's say, a property where you can get access to the seller, whether if it's not listed a for sale by owner, or even if it is listed, you can always present an offer in person or talk to the seller. If they're living in the house and the house is being showed by the broker, you can ask to have the seller there and ask the seller some questions and find out what's the real motivation here. You know, what do they want? It's amazing when you ask people what they want, the answers that you get. If you say, what do you want? And they say $200,000, well, that's not the real story. The real story is I want X amount of cash, and then after I pay off my loan and closing costs, I need that cash to do the following. Now, for most sellers who aren't motivated, it's I need all the money I can get out of this as quickly as possible so I can move on to my new house. That's not the sellers we want to deal with. We want to deal with people who have motivations: divorce, foreclosure, death in the family, loss of a job transfer, and so forth. So we need to get to what does the seller really want, bottom line. Okay? Number 2, do your research. Before you make an offer, make sure you know the parameters of this deal, what you can do with it on the back end, how you can finance it, how you're going to exit the property. Do your due diligence and your research before making the offer. Now, there's certain research we have to do about the title of the property and inspection and so forth after we're under contract, but I'm talking about prior to making the offer. Do all the research about the neighborhood, about the parameters of the deal and so forth as much as you can before making the offer. Number 3, if you're dealing with a FSBO in particular, you want to bring the seller into reality. And by the way, if you're dealing with a for sale by owner who has called you or you called them, you should deal with these 3 things over the phone and nothing else. Don't make offers over the phone. Don't mention price. Don't discuss terms. There's only 3 things. Actually, research is really after the call, so it's really 1 and 3. Know what the seller wants. Find out what the real problem is, and try to walk them down into reality if they're living on a cloud. So typically for sale by owners, they go on Zillow. Zillow says it's worth $250. They want $250. You know it's only worth $200. How do you get them out of the cloud? Well, you're going to have to reason with them a little bit and try to walk them down. Don't make an offer like I can only offer you $150 and you're asking $250 because you're going to scare them away. Just sort of walk them down off of their expectations, like, Mr. Seller, how do you know your house is worth $250, or what you're asking? He may say, well, there's a house next door that's for sale for $250. And then you ask him some questions like, well, what does your kitchen look like? And what does that kitchen look like? Is it the same? Have your house been updated? Is there any deferred maintenance? And try to walk them down and make them understand, especially if it's listed by a real estate broker, it's going to sell for a premium because that 6% broker fee knocks it off. So you can knock them down from $250, 6% right off the top for the realtor, minus repairs that the property would need to be comparable, minus the factor of uncertainty of or actually certainty in terms of your offer of very few contingencies, which we'll discuss in a bit, and closing quickly and getting rid of the problem. And that all has value. So you try to walk them down the best you can to get them into the reality of maybe it's worth $200 or $200 less or less than $200, depending on the condition of the property. So you want to bring the seller down to reality before you even consider making an offer. Don't lowball and then justify your lowball. Walk them down to reality and then make your offer below that. Number 4, leave room to negotiate. Now, when you're dealing with a bank-owned property that's listed low on purpose and people are bidding up, then the real estate broker who's listing the property is going to say, give us your highest and best. And, in that realm, there's not a lot you can do. But when you're negotiating with an ordinary seller, whether it's listed or not, you always want to leave room for a counter, because most people don't feel like it's fair or they got the better end of the deal, or at least a fair deal, unless they beat you up a little bit, right? So you might start with a low ball offer or something below the asking price after you've walked them down to that asking price. And then they'll counter you, and then you counter back, and finally you get to the point where you really want to be in the first place and they think they beat you up. Or, ask for ridiculous things like, I want all the furniture, or I want the hot tub, or I want, X, Y, and Z. I want something in the garage. I want the lawn maintenance tools and so forth. And then you can back off those things. So ask for more than you want and then back off. Leave room to negotiate. Don't make your best offer up front in most cases. Number 5. This is particularly the case when you're talking about a listed property with a broker. Leave the contingencies to a minimum. There's all kinds of seminars out there where people talk about, subject to my partner's approval, subject to my dog's approval, subject to this, subject to that. You only need one weasel clause or contingency clause, and that's the inspection contingency. And in most states, that's built right into the standard realtor contract. Basically says you have, X amount of days, 7, 14, 21, whatever, to inspect the property, raise objections to it. If the seller won't fix it or drop the price accordingly, then you get out of the contract and get your earnest money. You're not in breach. Okay? Just keep in mind when you're dealing with HUD, as a seller, won't let you do that. They'll let you out of the contract, but you don't get your earnest money back. But most sellers will allow you an inspection contingency. Now, this is a little risky, but if you're dealing with a property you've been in several times, and you've looked at it and it doesn't look like much, it's not that old, you're not worried about an engineering issue, a foundation issue, or a mold or anything scary, just looks like a basic cosmetic rehab in a relatively new house, you could make an offer without an inspection contingency, and that would really take notice on the seller's side, especially their listing broker, and particularly if it's a bank-owned property. But again, I wouldn't advise that unless you really know the structure of a house well enough to be able to visually inspect it for an hour or so and come to the conclusion with 99% certainty that there's no major problems without a real full inspection with an inspector. Okay? So beginners shouldn't do that, but even so, keep your contingencies to a minimum. You don't have to have 5 contingencies in there. Okay? Make multiple offers. It's number 6. Especially when you're dealing with a for sale by owner. If you make an offer of X, the answer is yes or no. If you offer A or B, well, then the choice is A or B. Some sellers not realizing there's a C option, none of the above. They had no offers, now they have 2. And the reason you do that is psychologically, as a sales process, you want them to move to one or the other. So when you want the seller to carry terms, what you're going to do is you're going to make a really low-ball cash offer, so that stings and move them towards the offer with the terms. And by the way, in the order of things, make sure you make the terms offer first with the higher price, because if you make the cash offer, they may be so ticked off they don't want to hear the offer. So just make sure you do them in the right order. So make multiple offers, like a cash and a terms offer. And then the most important thing about this is follow-up. So if you're dealing with a bank-owned property listed with a broker, you make an offer, you don't hear anything because there's lots of other offers. Follow up. Have your broker, if you have a buyer's agent, follow up with the listing broker. A lot of times your offer gets lost in the mix, and a lot of times you may have lost the bid to somebody else for just a few grand more, and chances are, that person's an investor too, 50-50, they won't close. They can't get financing, or they found something they didn't like, or they changed their mind, or just couldn't raise the money and just didn't close, and now it's about to fall out of contract, and some listing brokers will just put it right back on the MLS. Some will go through the backup offers or the other offers and call through them. But what you want to do is make sure that you or your agent is calling that agent consistently every week to see what's going on and kind of be in their face. So timing-wise, if the property's about to fall out of contract and you or your broker calls that listing broker and says, hey, what's the status of 123 Main Street? Well, funny you should ask. It's about to fall out of escrow. Refax your offer and we will take a look at it if you can match, the other buyer's offer that isn't going to close. Okay? So follow up. Now, on a for sale by owner, you're gonna over the phone know what they want, bring them into reality, do your research, meet with them, make an offer, leave room to negotiate, put it under in writing with minimum contingencies, make multiple offers, and if you can't close them in that first meeting, then just follow up. Keep calling them every 3 to 4 weeks. People's motivations and situations change. They may say no up front, but 6 months later, stinging pain of making payments on a vacant house or getting calls about people vandalizing it or code violations or whatever, change in financial circumstance, they may change their tune. And again, you want to be in their face all the time because they say luck is being in the right place at the right time. Well, statistically, the more places you are and more of the time, odds are you'll be in the right place at the right time. So it's not luck, it's called statistics. Okay, so make sure that the statistics work in your favor. So these 7 tips will help you get more of your offers accepted. And again, I didn't mention anything about price or terms other than the double offer. These are just the strategies to make sure, more than likely than not, your offer gets accepted. In another video, we'll talk about negotiating the offer, price, and terms. But in the meantime, this is Bill Bronchick. I hope you've enjoyed this, and that video will be coming soon.